Well, I'm here in the mountains of North Georgia doing some hunting with my primitive bow. And one of the things that I've always had an interest in is finding out what ancient people were actually eating. Now, of course, we know they hunted animals, but what about the plant materials? I know that one of the most important food sources for native people was acorns. Anywhere that acorns were found, it seems that native people capitalized on it and used that food source quite heavily. I know tribes out in California would make regular forays up into the hills to collect acorns, and they would process them in bedrock mortars that were used for generations. I've just happened to wander up underneath this white oak tree, and I've noticed there's a bunch of acorns here that have fallen on the ground. And today I think what I'm going to do is a little experiment. I'm going to collect some of these acorns and I'm going to process them and see how they are in terms of edibility. How many times this scene has played itself out over the centuries is unfortunately lost to time. I noticed these acorns had fallen off the tree much earlier than normal, so I capitalized on it just as the ancients would have done. After just a few minutes, I've collected a bunch in my shirt, nice little handful. So I'm gonna go ahead and take these home and attempt to process them, wash the tannic acid out, and make these things edible. I've returned home with my haul of acorns, and I actually picked up another variety too, some acorns from the water oak tree, and you can see the difference between them. And what's really cool is that I'm actually going to process these separately so I can determine the difference in taste and texture. And it's really exciting to do this because I've never done it before. I know that acorns were eaten in the past by a lot of different ancient cultures, and by experimenting in this way, we're actually going to be resurrecting tastes from the past, which is really exciting. But first we've got to process these. Now, processing these is twofold because you've got to remove this little cap, and it really holds on quite tightly. I found that if you bite them like that, you can use your teeth as a pair of pliers to pull them out of there. Just have to use just the right amount of pressure to crack those holes. Because these acorns had fallen so early, they were noticeably softer than acorns that ripened normally and dropped off the tree on schedule. Would this affect the finished product? Hopefully this experiment would reveal an answer. This is painfully slow processing these. I gotta pick each shell apart by hand. They must have had a way to do this where it was sped up. They must have had a technique, because I mean, you'd be here all day just to have a little bowl of acorn mush. Thing I've noticed is a number of these have got these little worms in them, these little oak worms. There he is. And I think that's one reason why these acorns fell off the tree early, is because these oak worms were in them. Now I'm doing the water oaks, and I'm finding that these are much easier to process. The nut meat comes out. They also don't have any bugs in them, which is a real benefit because these are all coming out whole. I also think these are a little bit early too, because I actually pulled these off of the tree and they weren't on the ground, so they hadn't been dropped yet. Well, I finally got them processed, the white oak and the water oak. And what a drastic difference between these two acorns. The white oak obviously does not look so appealing. It's going to need to be rinsed out, and then we're going to go ahead and boil these to leach out the tannic acid. You can't eat acorns just raw as they are, because the tannic acid will give you an upset stomach. The great thing about white oak acorns is that they have a very low level of tannic acid, and they tend to be much sweeter. And that's why wild animals like squirrels and deer relish these acorns. But they certainly do eat other acorns too. Water oaks are very high on their diet list. So we're going to go ahead and process these, boil the tannic acid out of them, and then try them and see how they taste.
To clean up the acorns and remove the debris, the acorns are first washed in a stream. You can see the water being stained from the tannic acid. Then a fire is started. A small pot of water is boiled and the acorns are added. You can see the water stained from the leaching out of the tannic acid. The water is then carefully poured off and the process is repeated several times.
Now, after being boiled and several changes of water, I've got the acorns, and they have all the tannic acid leached out of them. So what I'm going to do finally is mash these into a meal, and then I'm going to try it. I'm really excited to see how this turns out. Okay, I'm going to try the white oak first. It's really kind of soft. These are young acorns, so they're not quite as hard and as dry as when they are when you get them later in the year. I don't know, maybe I'm just a weird guy, but I just get so excited about this. Rediscovering these secrets of the past. It's just so cool. This is something that people have been eating for thousands of years. It's got a really mild smell to it, but I think that's about good. And I'm going to try some. Not bad. It doesn't have that astringent flavor anymore. It doesn't have that bite, that tannic acid bite. It's a very unique flavor though. It's still a little bit bitter, but maybe it's because these acorns were also they weren't ripe when I got them. They were dropped early off the tree. But there is a sweetness. There's like a mix of a bitter and a sweet flavor to it. I mean, I could see how this would be really filling if you were to have some venison and wild greens with acorn mush. Wow, what a unique flavor. It's looking a little nicer. That those white oak acorns turned kind of mushy brown. It was very unappealing looking. This looks a lot nicer though. It's more of a yellowish color. I think that's about good. I'm going to try this now. Definitely a different taste with these water oaks. And definitely a lot more bitter. They don't seem to have that as much of an astringent taste, but They are definitely a lot more bitter than the white oaks. There is a underlying different flavor though to it. I really can't even explain it. I'll try the white oak again real quick. Oh yeah. White oak is much more palatable, much milder. The texture is similar, but the white oaks have a much sweeter aftertaste to them. Wow. That's interesting. Well, there you have it, acorns for food. It's really a cool thing to go out and taste these unusual flavors from the past. And obviously, this was an experiment. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to wait to collect some acorns later on in the season when they ripen and actually fall off the tree and see if there's a difference. I've got a hunch that there might be. I think those riper acorns may actually be a little better and more palatable. We'll see. But thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed.